pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just for the public, I'm opening the meeting because we're going to, Tim Hill, our attorney on the Rams Head dock application, had drafted the resolution for us, and we just had a couple of questions on conditions, so I wanted to just have him pulled in first for that, and the other two can come back. So, starting off, I think there were 3 areas that had questions still. And once again, the public hearing is closed. This is just town board work session for us to discuss the resolution. And no public comment on it. So one of the things on here was the extinguishment of the easement. So Tim, in here you had put in that upon completion of construction and prior to any use of the dock, the applicant shall execute and cause to be filed the paperwork for extinguishing the easement. Was there a reason that you put it in that order of events as opposed to prior to us issuing the permit?
I think we just want, the critical point is that it be filed. The applicant, is not going to be able to control the process by which the county completes that, documentation of its processing of the real property interest there. So that could be modified just to provide that it needs to be that needs to be filed, and not the issue about use can be removed.
Filed prior to permit issuing, right?
Yeah,
Correct.
I would say prior to us issuing the permit.
Correct.
We need proof.
100%. Yep.
Proof that it's been filed, not that it's been fully executed by the county.
Right.
So just,
That will take some time.
yeah, just that the documents have been filed with the county and the process is moving forward, and then we can issue the permit so that we know that that is happening.
Correct.
Otherwise, all the work can happen without them ever filing,
Correct.
release the easement.
Yes.
And I think, by the way, we're being very reasonable with that because we're not requiring it to be acted upon, just the filing of it. So, I think that's meeting people halfway. Time is of the essence, and I think we're being more than fair in doing this. But on the same token, that easement has to be filed for because that needs to be extinguished and it needs to be part of the Rams Head Inn property.
Yeah.
Because that
It
dock,
has to be the owner.
correct.
Yes.
Otherwise, I would like a dock on 28 Nostrum.
Right. Okay. All right, so that was the first item. The second one that I had a question on was number 5, with respect to prohibition upon overnight sleeping on boats at the dock. I was thinking that that's harder, like if someone wanted to enforce it, you've got to go on the dock and knock on the
Yep.
and find out if someone's actually sleeping there. So why not just have prohibition against any boats other than dinghies and the launch?
Reasonable.
That's what we
It's definitely reasonable because one of the main, you've hit the nail right on the head about being enforceable. To think that if there's, a boat down there in the middle of the night, police come by, there's called, somebody makes a complaint, got to go down at 3 o'clock in the morning, knock on the, should be a boat on there. Dinghies, great. The launch, okay. But the dinghies and the launch would be the only thing that should be there overnight.
Yeah.
So you'll figure out the exact wording on that, Tim?
Yes.
And then the
Number
last, number 2, what? Oh, what do you have on number 2? I didn't have any comments there.
I think we can just leave that.
Okay.
The other, we had discussed electricity would be allowed, but not water. And that was still up for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we should allow the water with the electricity because we don't prohibit it anywhere else. Like, we received numerous dock applications that call for both water and electric, and we haven't denied them. So we don't really have solid grounds for denying water on this dock. But that's my take on it.
Yeah. The counter argument to that is there's two docks sort of that we're juggling here. And neither one of them have water. However, I see your point.
Yeah.
No. Tough one. What do you think, Jim?
I think you should be consistent.
Yeah.
You know, I think consistency is important. But Meg points out it's correct that, that we don't have anything, then I think you have to go that way. Be consistent. I get what they have and they don't have, but again, trying to be as consistent as possible. You know, we're, in terms of lighting, by the way, is just simply for safety.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
Dark, people are coming back down to the dock, going back on the launch, go back out to their boat. You got to have some, soft lighting that outlines the, don't want anybody falling in the water, and things like that. So it's very light sensitive. We make sure that it's appropriate for what it's used for, and strictly to outline the
Footpath, really.
footpath, so to speak. Yes.
All right. All right.
Yeah, I personally was on the other side with no water, just in terms of, trying to keep it as, a more limited use as to
Yeah.
what takes place on the dock, but if you three.
Well, I feel like we allow water on residential docks and we allow it on commercial docks. And if this is a hybrid dock, there's really it's like if we just strictly did not allow it on residential docks, then we would have, I think, more
Yeah.
grounds to say, well, no, you shouldn't have it. But I feel like because we do allow it in both instances, there's no reason to truly deny it. Like, if we don't have
To go back to,
reason.
yeah, I mean, I worry also, we just, as Meg is saying, we do allow it. I mean, even though we probably shouldn't. I mean, it could be because of aquifer and, and these are all sensitive areas, no shoreline area isn't. But the owner themselves, and almost in all these docks, it's in their own interest to be careful.
Right.
So I would hope maybe that would mitigate my fear that overuse would result here.
Well, there's three of you, it doesn't have to be unanimous all the time, so we'll leave that out.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything else on this that needed to
No.
tweak
No.
before we?
No.
All right, so Tim, if you would go ahead and just make those edits, we'll take a look at it as soon as we're done with this meeting, and then we'll get it, to Amber, and she will get it back up on the website in its amended form.
Sure, will do.
Okay, all right.
That's good.
We'll see you at 6, just to make sure everything goes smoothly there.
Okay.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Bye.
All right, so I guess we just can get Jerry and Stephen back in here.
I think we do fine.
Christina, could you pull Jerry and Stephen back in? Because he is leading the discussion, I believe, on accessory dwelling.
Just give us a minute or two and we'll, let them back in.
Sure.
It'll be raring to go.
How you doing, Reed? Good.
I think Reed's short-term rentals.
He's the next.
I figured I better be here for accessory apartments.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really, but I was.
No,
No.
you're here for number 3.
Christina, is he able to be heard if he sat there and presented, or does he have to go up there?
No, because you would sit in first row here.
Yeah. We'll do that when we get to number, are you skipping to number 3 or no?
Oh, no, I'm just bringing it up, killing time before Jerry gets.
Oh, right, we're still missing.
Sorry, I wasn't going to start anything until.
Some handouts, should I hand them out?
Sure.
Sure.
That'd be great.
Like more paper.
Jerry had called and asked yesterday, there it is, about, neighboring towns So Mary Ellen threw together, sort of,
Thank you.
found what all the neighboring towns are doing about rentals, or most of them.
Okay.
And printed them out. I only printed out one because it's a lot of paper.
Yeah,
And it's,
Yeah.
I think just looking at the file may give you the answer you want. I.e., it shouldn't be so complicated.
Before you start your presentation, just so everyone,
we're gonna do ADUs. He's just handing out.
No,
papers.
it's,
I thought we were gonna do this first.
we were just killing time.
I thought we were gonna switch.
No, we are gonna switch. It makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
So the reason we're even addressing short-term rentals is we've had the discussion, I'm sure most people are aware of the tragedy in North Haven with an illegal short-term rental. And it turned out they weren't permitted, they weren't,
And they did work.
they did work on it, they weren't, it had no CO. So it's really, the key purpose of this whole discussion is health and safety.
These are just,
And how we go forward. That's
these are just an illustration of why we can't really rely on self-certification. These are the, did I give you one of these?
No.
Okay. This is the code for smoke alarms and pool barriers, because it's really just too complicated.
Just to recap one important point while we're handing out the materials. Jerry cited the tragedy in Noyak. Just to refresh everybody's memory on short-term rental. What we did when we passed that law is we had a clause in there that allowed people who are renting, either short or long-term, to fill out a self-evaluation, saying that in fact you had smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, et cetera, pool gates and all that kind of stuff. They had to get that notarized and submitted with their application. The problem with that is, and Reed will explain it even more carefully, is the fact that when we issue a permit for a rental property, we are assuming some responsibility that in fact these things have been met. Now, are you prepared as a town to take the word, just the word of? Or when you issue, now you issue a permit, with that comes some responsibility and liability. So I think that's an important key point in the background here. We're not looking to create more work for ourselves. Obviously, the building department has a lot of things to do. However, with the number of pools on the island, which are now around 900, we're very concerned. With the number of old buildings and older buildings that might be rented for long or short-term purposes, you've got to make sure that everything is up to snuff for a safety point of view. So that's why we're where we're at here,
right.
all right?
So just to reinforce that, I mean, the number one priority is health and safety, but a close second is town's liability.
Right. I mean, I think that we have both sort of an ethical mandate
Right.
and also a liability issue. And we need to ensure safety. You know, it's, if you're going to regulate something, you have to regulate. You can't
Right.
just.
Reed, just for a quick summary, the town, after the short-term rental law was put in place, hired a firm, Granicus, to oversee everything for us. And they gave us reports and they did their work. And after using them for 2 years, the building department makes a recommendation that we can do probably a better job ourselves.
I mean, it was actually, it was good to have because it was a nice framework and it sort of set up a foundation going forward. One of those sheets has why we're better off with Granicus. So I just have bullet.
Yep.
Basically, the cost was very high, and ultimately, it was not the sort of one-stop shopping that
We have
we were led
advertised.
to believe.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
In other words, they made a lot of mistakes, and for a variety of reasons. One thing is the way we've entered things in Municity. We don't have a reliable sort of north-south designation. So they were, I have an example of mistakes they were making. Sending violations to former owners, getting addresses wrong. So they would often mistake 58 South Midway for 58 North Midway, and they'd violate the property. There are fraudulent listings, which are rare, where people, put up a fake listing and then try and entice someone to send them a deposit.
Oh,
Finding old listings from previous years that just weren't taken down, and the people sometimes didn't even own the property, or certainly weren't renting it. Or a lot of times people get a license at the 11th hour. They come in the end of May, that doesn't get processed, and so they find in June they find a listing on Airbnb, and it just hasn't gone through. They send them a violation. And one of the big problems is if you want to have some really irate people, give them an incorrect violation. It really throws out the deadline. When we do it, what we're finding is we go through, we find scour the listings periodically. We can tell where the property is very often, much more accurately, because we know the terrain. And also, Brett and I have been to an awful lot of properties. Brett's built half of them, I think. So we have a lot, we can tell, that's on Dickerson Creek, that's, whereas they were sometimes sort of grasping at straws or making mistakes. We also sometimes can bring into it, we can then check the file and see, that's an illegal accessory structure. That's supposed to be a shed. When did they convert it? We can add a depth to the whole thing that's very helpful. And sometimes, there are extenuating circumstances, or one problem that we found that happens a lot is the code is tough to understand, and it's sometimes very confusing. But rentals are one of the problem areas. So what happens is somebody gets a long-term rental, a rental registration.
right.
They don't understand that that's not a short-term license. I think, let's see, if you look at the list of the fact sheet, if you go down to complaints, we had 9 complaints in 2022 about rental issues. 4 were valid and resolved, but
What type of complaint is valid?
in that case, 3 of them, I believe, were people who had long-term licenses and didn't know that that wasn't a short-term license.
Okay.
One of them was actually was somebody who just was renting short-term and shouldn't have been. So we stopped them. The not valid were, I'm trying to think, there were 5 not valid. One I know was a neighbor complained that they were renting it we went over, it was a party, family party. Another one was a big family get together. They had a ton of people. Very often, the things that trigger the complaint are really circumstantial evidence. Too many cars parked in there. We get a lot of complaints, too many cars parked in the parking lot and they have out-of-state plates.
Right.
Things like that. And so we go and we determine that, oh no, it's actually just a family shindig. But we had a lot more complaints previously. We don't have a lot of records going back before this year. Because we just didn't keep track of the complaints, but, we had a lot more complaints before. It seems like COVID spiked things. It seems to me that when Airbnb and, you know, the online rentals, short-term rentals came out, there was a huge spike in people who decided it was a great cottage industry, who subsequently decided that maybe it wasn't. I think maybe because houses got trashed. If you've got a situation that's generating neighbor complaints, it's probably causing problems for the homeowner.
Correct.
You know,
Yes.
and I think a lot of people tried it and decided it wasn't working out so well.
Well, I think a lot of people during COVID either moved out here full-time or decided that they were going to use their own property, so they weren't renting it as much too. I did see that trend.
But there were a lot of, people were on edge. There were a lot of complaints, I think, previously. But it was not, I don't think it was a problem. I think it was more just,
I mean, the rental law came into existence before COVID.
yeah,
So I think the initial, where we used to get the complaints was they just didn't want a rental next door to them or in their neighborhood. You know, there was still the battle and the aftermath of the battle for whether we should have short-term rentals or not, and whether the law was fair or it wasn't. You know, so we were still battling that for a year or so. I think people have calmed down about that and realized that the law itself, forget this aspect of it, but the law is pretty darn fair. You know, it allows you a rental, you know, every other East End town said 14 days or more, 30 days or more. We said no, one rental per 14-day period. So if you got a 12-day rental, you take it. You got a 5-day, you took it. You're up 5, you're down the 9, you know, the remainder. So, and then we put in the grandfather clause for people economically. And we thought that would be a big thing. Basically, 3 to 5 people every year apply for that. And the grandfather basically is for people in a low-income area that oftentimes move out, rent their properties during the high season for 1 week. And they're allowed to do that. So, you know, the previous supervisor had asked for four of those. We gave them the entire season between Memorial Day and Labor Day for those. But there weren't a lot of people that took advantage of that.
you know how many people there were?
One.
We have one.
We have one. So I know the first year was
We
3.
had a couple people that I think tried, but they actually didn't meet the
Right.
info.
Income.
Thresholds.
We call that I think the homesteaders.
Yes, we
clause,
did.
Not grandfather clause.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't say that. Yes, yeah.
And we've got
The
one.
homesteaders, yeah.
That's another one that, I mean, I think it was correct to consider it as an option, but it's been surprising.
Originally, I think we called it hardship, you know, that was the hardship clause type of thing. But we were very reasonable as a town board saying, recognizing that, saying, you know, we don't want to see people lose their properties, and we did accommodate them and gave them much more latitude. But again, it wasn't a high number of people ever.
Well, it's like a lot of things, a lot of the complaints that occurred, I think of the house on Sylvan Road that, you know, was a huge issue originally. I think, in fact, and that sort of generated
Yeah.
a lot of the discussion. I'm sure, I think it's very hard for us to demonstrate a negative. And so proving that someone is renting it more frequently than once every 14 days to different people is very difficult. It's either very intrusive, you know, in other words, it has to be complaint based. That's in my conclusions.
And the reality is, we're not seeing the complaints, so that's not really the problem.
We don't see a lot of complaints. When someone does something, when there is a problem, it's very unpleasant for the neighbors. But usually it's a noise and disorderly conduct violation. And that's really a policeman.
Yeah, right.
In other words, and that's one thing that we do need to do is coordinate better with the police department. If they get a noise complaint, especially if they get multiple noise complaints at a property where they seem to think that there's a rental.
Excellent point.
Then we should go, and then we, I think, have a mandate to do a door knock.
Yeah.
Are you renting, or you?
Right.
Yeah. but not, we can't just be going, we can't just be going to people's houses and.
But the problem with that is that when you knock on the door, those people are already gone for the most part, because you work Monday through Friday. The noise complaints are either at night or on the weekend.
Yeah, but he's getting a record of it, so that's something that we could talk about with the owner. If you have a record of it, every other weekend, we have a noise complaint there.
We would have to send someone out realistically on a weekend, I mean.
Right.
In other municipalities, we did that. We hired part-time code enforcement officer,
Yeah.
work nights and weekends during the season.
It's rare enough here that I think the way to do it would be to give someone, a couple hours of overtime to do it.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know,
It's a short season.
it's a couple times a year, maybe, it's not.
In perspective, when you went to East Hampton, where we developed the law, and we went over there, we found out that 8 people employed during the high season, separate cars, uniform, whole thing. But Montauk, if you remember, was out of control. I mean, the hundreds of complaints in Montauk. I mean, the bars were overcrowded till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. People were sleeping on the beach. Forget the rentals, they had problems just out of sight. So everything's and that never happened here. People said, we don't want to see Shelter Island become like that. Well, we didn't. This helped to a certain extent, but this has never been the issue. But the one thing that we're doing now is we're not trying to create more. It's all about safety and liability. So that's what we're focused in on right now, trying to do a better job in terms of protecting the town's interest in issuing the permit, and number one, protecting human life.
So Reed, real quick, with that said, it's really not, we're not really just talking about short-term rentals, we're talking about rentals, period.
Correct. Rentals, period, right, yes.
I mean, it's tricky because we have a rental registry. We don't have a rental license, long-term rental license or permit. We only have a license to rent short-term. And a lot of that's confusing for people because one is really, in a sense, it's a registration of a property. The other is a license for an activity. And the short-term rentals, I mean, it seems to me that I don't want to go on and on here, but I think that there are 3 types of rent, 3 categories of rentals to me, not 2. There's short-term, there's long-term, there's mid-term. And I would define it as a real long-term rental is a year-round rental, and that contributes to affordable housing. Short-term rental is one of 2 things. It's either an owner-occupied structure where they want to make some money. They rent a room out either in the primary or the secondary structure, and they, they're making money, but there's oversight. I don't know that, I think if anything, that helps people stay in a house because it gives them a source of income that maybe they might not have otherwise. Then you've got the short-term rentals that are really, to me, a little bit tricky, which are where it's really a business model, where it's someone who's figured out that if they buy a property, it's basically making a dividend.
It's not owner occupied.
They're renting it out, they're churning it out, they're not there. And that's when you run into trouble. And then the midterm rentals are, longer than 2 weeks, but not a year-round rental. It's a summer, person who's got a summer house.
Right.
And they want to rent it out for the
Traditional Shelter Island.
Yeah.
Right, or you rent.
Actually, the traditional rent.
3 months.
One of the things we put in there that's key in this thing is that if the person is owner occupied, that's not a problem. If it's not owner occupied, but the person is still on the island, then obviously they know that. They can call that person can respond. If the person goes to Europe for the summer, or goes to Canada, goes upstate New York or something, rents their house out for the summer, you have to have a contact person. That contact person is part of the application. So that if we're having a problem and you can't get a hold of the people in Europe, you don't know where they are, But there is that contact person, the police department calls the contact person and says, hey, listen, maybe you need to get over to the property and take a look at it and figure out, you're representing the owner at this point. So that was a key element inside that piece of legislation, that there was always somebody physically here on the island to be able to monitor a potential problem at that property in the absence of the owner.
Yes, and we require, that they have a contact. There's another issue that's coming up more and more that I think probably the town board needs to start thinking about, which is more and more you're seeing businesses who are buying houses, residential, and the danger to me of the short-term rental that's a business is it's really a commercial venture in a residential area.
Right.
But this other thing that's happening now is we've got the Pridwin, the Chequet, Leon, and some other places that are buying properties, and they're basically using them as dormitory housing for their staff.
Right.
It's kind of a gray area, and we've gotten complaints about it. In fact, one of the complaints in that 9 was a noise complaint by a neighbor, and it was, we went over and Michael went over and talked to them and asked them to keep it down, and, so far it's been a little better. But they have a bunch of people who work in a restaurant and get home at 2 o'clock in the morning and want to wind down.
Sure.
They're smoking cigarettes and things like that. How do you handle that?
Well, New York state law says that you can't discriminate against that type of occupancy, because unless they're not acting as the functional equivalent of a family.
Right.
So you have to, single-family dwelling units for families or the functional equivalent of family. And like in Southampton, there was indicia that we came up with that spoke to whether or not it was acting as a functional equivalent of family. I'll just read them real quick. The group is one which in theory, size, appearance, structure, and function resembles a family unit. The occupants share the entire dwelling and live and cook together as a single housekeeping unit. A unit in which various occupants act as separate roomers is not deemed to be occupied as a functional equivalent of family. The group shares expenses for food, rent, or ownership costs, utilities. The group is permanent and stable. Evidence of stability include like the presence of minor children, members of the household having the same address for purposes of voter registration, blah, blah, blah. So there are ways, and now this, if you get hit with a violation for renting not to a family or a functional equivalent, it's a rebuttable presumption that if you don't meet one of these criteria, then you're able to go to the building inspector to make your case that you are indeed the functional equivalent of family. Long story short, if these businesses house their staff and the staff is eating together, playing together, cooking together, whatever, unfortunately, they would fall into.
How about,
Yeah, I'm not sure whether, because Stephen and I have talked about this, as I asked about it, and it's a real.
how about code-wise with the numbers? Can they have three in a bedroom?
They're allowed to have 2 people in a room, 2 non-related people in a room.
You're allowed to have double the amount of bedrooms.
Yes.
Is what our code says.
The one thing I want to point out is that the town has played a role here, and I'll use Sunset Beach as an example. For the last 7, 8 years that I've been on the board, we have meetings, annual meetings, because of the cabins and the situation we had with the cabins. We sit down with the owners, and it's gotten so much better. Why? Because they have a supervisor now that actually lives there in the cabins and overseeing them. So when the staff gets off at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and they go back, and that starts to happen, because we do have neighbors that surround it, and everybody knows on Shelter Island, sound at night carries a long, long way, and we put it kind of an end to it. It's not perfect, but where the town can play a role, we have responsibly, and that goes to Jim Reed. I mean, Jim, the police chief, has been great with this. He organizes that, he brings, and we try to anticipate those kinds of problems and cut them off, before they happen.
So Stephen, the premise is a short-term rental is a business in neighborhoods, and that's why, there's opposition to it. If restaurants buy houses, and there's 8 cars and 16 people or whatever, what's the difference?
Again, if it's not a turnover and they're living together for the entire season, cooking together, playing together, whatever, they're functional equivalent family. Difference with short-term rentals, they're usually a weekend or a week, high turnover, separate and distinct.
It's 14 days or less.
You're operating a hotel in a residential area versus staff housing, which is.
And it is, just because people don't like something doesn't mean it's wrong. Right. It may not be an ideal situation, but
Yeah.
you can have a very I know some neighbors on Shelter Island I wouldn't want to live next to, and they own their homes. And
So let's just sort of wrap this up.
Okay.
What I'm hearing is that the town board is concerned about the health, safety, and welfare of the
Yes.
tenants. Our current code, unfortunately, the way I read it, is that the checklist is only for the short-term rentals that are licensed as a vacation rental. So a licensed vacation rental.
I mean, the current,
Right,
yeah.
current
That's the only
code.
one. So year-round rentals don't need
Right.
even the self-checklist. So I think what we need to do is make that more robust and make it that every rental unit needs to have either an inspection done by the building department or a licensed engineer and architect certifying that the property fully complies with the New York State Uniform Fire Prevention and Building Code and the town code.
Annually?
It depends. Most of the terms in other towns are 2 years. So every 2
So let's
years.
do this.
And, yeah. So there's that. But as far as, Reed's saying there's not many complaints and we have other town code provisions that could ameliorate the concerns that people have in the noise and the parking. The town board has to decide, do you want to make this more stronger and you wanted a rental permit, an actual rental permit law where every non-owner occupied rental dwelling unit has to have a permit. And then, again, revisit whether or not you want to have all these options for vacation rentals, because as, we're going to discuss, and we might as well shoehorn it in now, because this is what really we're going to discuss for ADUs, is the fact that the rental law allows you to bypass zoning, which says accessory apartments, owner-occupied dwelling units, have to be used for year-round occupancy. This code, again, bypasses and allows you to make vacation rentals. So if, our housing plan, which we're going to talk about later, says that we need to focus on ADUs, we're shooting ourselves in the foot with this rental law. So to help with that problem and bring, and other town, and this isn't a novel idea, I spoke about it before, Southall and Southampton, you can only have an ADU if it's inhabited by a family member or someone off the community housing registry. So it's a privilege. So I would suggest that you take it out of the rental law, at least that owner occupied vacation rental. Strike it, easy amendment, and then now we're back to where we were, where it has to be year-round occupancy for accessory.
All right, so I would just say, Reed's given us a tremendous amount of
Stuff to look at.
stuff to look at.
And
Let's do your conclusions.
Okay, well, and those, I just included the pool barrier and just to show you what these people would be expected to self-certify. Because it took me about 10 years to understand that. So my conclusions, some of which I've already gone into, are the rental code is riddled with problems that make it difficult to enforce. It needs to be focused on certain goals, which do not seem to be clearly articulated. There's a lot of fuzzy stuff in it. It needs to be clear. I think partially it's the ad hoc nature of the way it was put together. It was done, things were added year by year. It started out with the apartment stuff, the apartment license. I think that the apartment license needs to be somehow integrated better with the rental. Fire and Sag Harbor, I think we've all been through that, it's a mandate. My thought was, but I defer to you all and Stephen, perhaps the permits and registration should be yearly so that every year we do an inspection. Now, one thing to remember is a lot of these structures have been inspected, not a lot, I would imagine a fair amount of them, we'd be curious to know, as part of a renovation
Right.
or some kind of a certification. One thing that I think the town really needs to consider is having a revised C of O whenever there's a property transfer. I think it would both help with this, and I think it would enormously protect buyers who are doing cash sales, which we see more and more of. They do a cash sale, they don't realize there are violations on the property. We've seen a few situations that I think you're all aware of, where it passes via multiple cash sales through multiple owners, the same violations, and then it becomes tricky to enforce.
Yes, that would be an updated CO.
Right.
provision. Jerry and I talked about that.
It would give us a chance to verify that there aren't, that they haven't converted things. It
Right.
would give us a chance to verify safety issues. And it would, that way the buyer would know that they were buying something, that was.
Clean slate.
But again, just on that, to go back to health and safety, I would want it every year, because you don't know
A CO every year?
No.
Oh,
He's saying that.
the rental
That's
inspection.
what he's.
That was my thought. It says other towns do it every Tuesday.
It's every 2 years generally. No one does it every year. And also you got to think about our administrative resources. If he's going to have to do an inspection for all the rental permits every year.
I'm just going back to North Haven. So whatever.
When I was looking at it, it's basically a safety inspection, which we do a lot of.
Yeah.
It is a lot, but it's, we seem to have 110, and, it's not that many. 3 of us could do them, but 2 years, 2 years would certainly be easier.
Gordon and I were in a meeting recently, and we heard that the number on Shelter Island for rentals was 350.
Yeah, so he's only talking about the ones that actually have permits or license or are registered. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah,
Right, but
these
you
are-
wanna get them-
There's a whole universe out there.
Right.
So if you get into 300 or 400 to do.
And you do an annual,
inspection,
it's a
yeah.
lot. That's my point. I mean, you can, one new hire, maybe 2, I don't know, it's,
Well, that's also why you give them the option of having an outside
yeah.
person certify, as long as they have the certifications to do that.
The only problem is that that's very expensive. When I first started, like 6 years ago doing it, I can get it for like $750 for a certification. Now they want like $3,000, $3,500.
It's a liability.
So- Exactly. So to have someone do that annually and have to pay, that's onerous.
Yeah.
But then,
You can't keep it affordable then. I mean,
Right.
the whole point is,
Yeah.
that we're talking about.
We're charging a permit fee every year. It's a user fee, pays for the inspector.
Yeah.
Or, 2 years would certainly be more, every 2 years, as long as that's not a liability issue. My concern was that.
Yeah, it's not.
But you know more about that than I do.
I mean, you're looking for smoke detectors, you're looking for pool safety, you're looking for things that I don't
Egress
think in 2
windows.
years, yes, could they change? Yes, but I mean, in terms of
Yeah,
capturing.
no, fair enough.
Capturing
Yeah,
the-
fair enough. And they would certainly bring the number down to a manageable number. It'd be basically 3 inspections a week.
Mhm.
They're all gonna be jammed up into May, but.
Yeah,
and I just want to touch on accessory apartments again, so if we go back to that route, we get rid of that vacation rental option. In our code, an accessory apartment, you need to get a license and you need to have an inspection, and it's every 2 years. So we have that mechanism
I see,
already in
yeah,
place
yeah.
for that. And then
Okay.
back to, you were saying the user fee for any rentals. Obviously, we can come up with some incentive where that's waived if it's used for community housing, it's whatever.
Correct.
So.
Right, that's your next highlight.
Which fees, yeah. I think the fees, I think it's really important with the fees. They should reasonably cover the town's expense, cost of service, which isn't that much. It's not going to be that much. It's not going to be onerous. But we should be careful not to make it onerous. I was looking in some of the fees that some of these other towns are charging, and it seems to me like a bit of a money grab.
Yeah,
It seems like.
forcing people to do it illegally.
Yeah, and it's also, it's just gonna, if you make the fees too onerous, it's just gonna drive people underground.
Right.
We
Want to, the whole goal here is really
Correct.
to encourage
Correct.
compliance and safety.
But you
It's a
also,
nail right on the head.
you also want to, like, again, if you're gonna still allow vacation rentals, charge them a much higher fee
For
to maybe,
violations?
no,
Oh.
for even for the license itself. Because that could be a disincentive to do it and put the house into a year-round rental.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you want to
It
incentivize.
was, in Southold, they were thinking about it, where they would have to report their annual income. It would be a percentage based on their annual income. And, that, again,
They did that or they talked?
no, they thought about it, it died.
Talk about an enforcement nightmare.
No, I know, but that was something that they thought can dissuade.
The key words you just used, encourage compliance. Make it reasonable, make it fair, encourage.
And what a lot of people don't know in the short-term rental vein is that they're supposed to be collecting taxes, because they're basically, according to the Suffolk County Comptroller, deemed like mini hotels, motels. So they're supposed to be collecting a tax and paying that tax forward to the county, and people don't realize that, they don't do it.
No, it's actually stated, but we never got involved in that because we didn't want to get involved. It wasn't our business to get involved with that. That was us taking on way too much responsibility. But it was part of the thing in the original law that we stated that, the Suffolk County tax is real. So if you don't declare, and they catch up with you 4 years later, and they can prove it, the bill may be pretty high, but that's not us picking up, we only got accused of that when the law first came out by somebody who hated my guts. There were a few of them on the short-term rentals, the list goes on. That definitely wanted to, Colligan called the county to, never called the county on anybody, swear to God on the stack of Bibles, nor would I ever. It's your responsibility, you do what you have to, it's like paying taxes. You want to be, it's your
No,
responsibility.
I was just mentioning it as a PSA.
Right, yeah.
No, and it's actually, I think that just what's involved with the compliance with that would be onerous for a lot of people.
Right.
And it would encourage people to do it. But maybe we should just make a note of it on our application, that there is a law, not that we're enforcing, not that it's not our jurisdiction to
Just an
enforce,
FYI.
but an FYI.
And Suffolk County knows how to look on Airbnb.
Yeah.
Right. I know.
They can find you all by themselves.
A vast electronic paper trail.
Yes, and it's amazing the resources that come up with when there's taxes. to
Let's keep moving here.
So let's see here, if he's been.
Simple, clear regulation.
Yeah, I think please let's keep them simple, and also we would like to be, and enforceable, we would like to be just brought in for the discussion, because I think after all of our, all of our bashing our heads against the wall trying to enforce things, we have learned how people are gonna
Right.
Yeah.
try to evade. Yeah, I think we want to look into the accessory apartment license and somehow coordinate it with the rental. I said that earlier. Ultimately, there are very few complaints. We went through that. Many of the complaints are really quality of life issues. And yeah, digitizing the records, I think would be really useful. We just started in the past week really talking directly with the assessor's office, because Blanca has been scouring, Judith and Blanca, I guess, have been scouring the ads, because they want to make sure that the assessments are up to date.
Right.
And that helps us enormously, because if they can identify, situations where there's an illegal conversion, that's good for us, and vice versa.
So how does that work? They'll look at it, they say, oh, look at that nice basement. How do they know if it's in code or not?
Well, they pull the file.
Oh, they actually,
And-
okay.
Our file should reflect it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, our.
I understand. Yeah.
And that's one thing, there are a few things that we have to start doing. We have to start photographing, at final SIBO, at final inspections, and uploading things. One thing that they were saying, and I think it's very true, is that if the files were digitized, it would be a lot easier. Because what they have to do, as it stands now, is they have to pull the file and then they have to go in the archive room and pull the drawings. If all that were digitized, it would be.
So much more.
Yes.
We're coming into that.
I was gonna say,
all
you're
the
the
departments.
Association of Towns.
I am,
Okay,
yes.
so I think you and a couple of us, we need to revisit some of the vendors there because there is grant money available that
Right.
we can talk to. But we've never done it as a concerted town effort, so maybe we can coordinate one
Right.
day for vendor stalls.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of seemed like pie in the sky. I was actually talking a couple of years ago with East Hampton. Because they were in the process of doing it. They pull a big bus in and digitize it.
Yeah, with 5 scanners and at high speed.
This, it would be great to do it for the clerk's office.
Any questions for Reed?
Yes, exactly.
So what would be the next step going forward here?
I'd like to set up a working group, 2 town board members, Reed and myself, to start talking about the rental code, see what we want to do. So I think that's the next step. And we can come up with some draft and then bring it back in a work session.
I'll go for that, Steve. No, let her, she's got comprehensive plan with it.
Asking if she has anything else.
Oh,
I don't.
Okay. All right. Reed, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is moving right down to the ADUs. And what I did was, just real quick, we've discussed it and we feel that the accessory dwelling units are something that we can tackle right away to address the housing problem. And just real quick, I'm going to just go over a couple things in the housing plan. The short-term objectives: construct a maximum of 2 rental units at 69 North Ferry, constructs a maximum of 8 rental units at 12 South Ferry, and then provide funding for year-round ADUs, provided they can meet the requirements of town zoning and Suffolk County Health Department, and modify town code to increase year-round rentals. Then they have another section on legislative actions to facilitate the provisions of year-round ADUs. I'm not going to read it, but it's something we have to do. And then the last one is, who's the last? I don't know. There's another one. But it's, in other words, the housing plan specifically addresses ADUs, the need for them, the things we need to address, and I think we have to come up with how we're going to address them.
Well, the town board want me now to start drafting the rental code amendment to take out, because I could do that quickly, is take out the owner occupied vacation rental option. And again, that goes to the default year-round occupancy that it has to, like, that we can do in a month.
Right.
We'll have that done. So I just need direction from the board whether they want me to do that.
What do you think, guys? I think that's, yeah.
I think it's common sense. I think that's what we need to do.
I think it's common sense too.
The other side of the whole ADU discussion is incentives. Let's get it first where this is in place that we can have ADUs, and then we see what incentives meaning, possibly tax relief, possible WQI funds if they have to put in a system, things like that. What can we come up with to,
Yes.
I'd kind of like to do it more comprehensively instead of piecemealing it and doing little bits here and there, because, Fred Thiel has a kind of a proposal in front of everybody that helps establish some of these incentive programs, like accessory dwelling unit forgiveness loan program is one, an income tax credit, a real property tax exemption. It proposes all these different things to help promote ADUs. So I think we should kind of see how everything's going to play out and come up with a comprehensive picture of it before we go and start playing with the code, which is already kind of a hot mess.
Yeah.
I was reading the rental code and I was like, I can't even figure out how I would start with this.
Yeah, so
So
I think
that's kind of what I'd like to do.
in tandem with that, because again, why create the wheel when it's being created right there?
Right.
Yeah.
So like what she referenced with the ADU forgivable loan program, on the state, you can apply for up to $75,000 in loan money. And if you rent it as community housing for 20 years, it's forgiven, which is great. Then the income tax credit, which would be 50% of the difference between the market rate and the affordable rate, that would be a credit. The tax exemption would be up to 100% of the increase due to the ADU.
Years in process for
He-
those
it's
proposals?
He's proposing it as an assemblyman. You know,
Yeah.
putting it out to the assembly.
Could we expect it this year or this?
This was when the governor, TJ, when the governor had proposed her
or
ADU.
extreme measure?
They shot it down. They came up with this. And
So,
again,
It's an assembly bill.
they're
it's a
going through the
priority.
budget right now, so
Yeah.
then now's the time.
right,
It would go. If
it's
gonna
a
get done,
priority
it'll get done.
yeah, for everybody.
And then we also got info from Michael Daly, who's with East End YIMBY. And he provided 5 options for accessory apartments that start under $100,000 that are modular and that'll be delivered. So if they get, that means it's only 25,000 arguably out of pocket. And, you know, look at them, they're very nice and in keeping with the characters like it. So this could be a great opportunity to build more ADUs in the town through the carrot. But again, a condition precedent for any of that, in my mind, because of financial incentives, is to just tweak that rental law now and get rid of the owner occupancy vacation.
So Meg, you want it all encompassing, can, that,
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of like to just do it right the first time, as opposed to kind of piecemealing. Like, I hear what you're saying, I get it, but I feel like it will create more confusion than it needs to, rather than just doing it all at once.
I agree with you with everything else, but I'm saying we just going back to default, which is the zoning code, which is year round.
I have to look at it, I have to read it, I have to think about
I made a
it,
note to pull all of
yeah.
I think it's
the
a
legislation
possibility.
pieces to see what the conflicts and.
Yeah, I need to see what the
I feel like-
unintended consequences be.
Yeah, no, please do, and we'll revisit this conversation.
revisit.
But there's not many.
Next.
yeah.
So,
Thank you. Anybody else on this one?
No, sir.
Okay, next is a WQI report on Fresh Pond.
Oh, the man.
Joe gonna hit the timing?
It's really perfect timing,
I was gonna say, is Joe gonna give it or is it?
yes.
Joe comes out of nowhere.
All right. So I'm here to give an update on the overall Fresh Pond project and ultimately to request a public hearing in the next phases of addressing WQI funding for design services related to Fresh Pond. So a little history on the project. Prior to my hiring, the former town engineer, John Cronin, worked in conjunction with an ad hoc committee of neighbors and those affiliated or have an interest in Fresh Pond to solicit proposals and grant funding to analyze the source of eutrophication of the pond, deteriorating water quality, harmful algal blooms. The general theme was to identify the cause of the decreasing water quality in Fresh Pond. They were subsequently awarded a New York State grant to study the issue. And the total cost of the project was paid for through a combination of private funds from the Fresh Pond Neighbors Association, town, out of the existing town budget, and another portion from New York State's grant program. The analysis was data-driven and ultimately identified the source of decreasing water quality being an excess of phosphorus in the pond sediments. And the recommendations for remediation included a couple of items which were evaluated both by the engineering department as well as the Fresh Pond Neighbors Association for suitability, viability. And what we have before us is a request for design services to take this project to what's considered a shovel-ready status, where we would have permits and design documents in place to commence the remediation work if the construction funds became available. So what's happened in the past few weeks is that I made a presentation to the WQI committee seeking $147,000 in funds for design and permitting services to implement the recommendations from the engineering study. And that committee made a recommendation to the town board to approve such vote. And now there is a process, a legal procedure for the town board to evaluate those funds and subsequently cast their vote to do so. So that is a quick status update on the project. And I guess I'm available for questions here.
So when you did the presentation to the WQI, what's the ask?
The ask is for dollar amount, you mean? $147,000.
And $600.
$600.
We have it we have it as a resolution for setting a public hearing this evening.
Okay.
For February 28th.
Okay. Because I presume time is of the essence on this.
Time is somewhat of the essence, primarily to align with project completion and permitting for the subsequent grant cycle, so that we could take the results of the design documents and apply for construction funding.
There was this little hitch in the giddy up now, that the WQI did not advance the request for $6,900 to the town board,
That's right.
pending some scientific backing to the fact that removal of the plants would help the situation.
That's right.
And I think we received something. So I'm
Yes.
hoping they're going to reevaluate that. Do you have
That's right. At
information?
the February 2nd WQI meeting, we're going to revisit that subtask for $6,900, provide the requested documentation, and the committee may modify their recommendation to the board to include those funds or not to.
So,
include those
Steve,
funds.
if that happens, if we took out the $6,900 now, but we got some information that maybe they'll put it back in. If we set the hearing tonight, and then after February 2nd, we decide to put that back in, is that hearing not null and void, or
You're gonna have to renotice it because the
okay?
amount's different.
Is there any way we could word it that if the WQI approves this funding, we can go from there?
Yeah.
I mean, if it's of the essence, time is of the essence.
Could we set the hearing for the $6,900? It's a separate
Yes.
thing.
Say it.
Yeah, right?
It's a separate issue.
Right, okay.
Makes sense.
Joe, any, this initial cost, 147,000 or so, what's the cost as the decade unfolds to the town in terms of seeing this through to completion?
So the request now is for only design services, design and permitting services. This particular type of project, being a freshwater wetland, is not typically subject to grant funding that includes compensation for design. So the burden of design documents is typically on the applicant. That's the impetus for completing this phase of the project. If we are to complete the design work, we would then be qualified for construction grant funding. The total cost, construction-wise, should be about $1 million. Some of that is capital costs that are upfront, and then there's an ongoing cost of running the facility. That's how the remediation will actually take place. Essentially, what's being recommended is an in-situ filtration system, which will remove phosphorus from the phosphorus-rich layers of the pond and return the treated water back to the pond. But that process has to happen for what many would consider an extended period of time. So the project life is estimated to be about a decade, and that is the scale with which we would expect to see the permanent effects of remediating come into full effect.
So when you say $1 million, my mind goes to, all right, about 100 a year, 100,000 a year. I mean,
Some
you know,
is front-loaded for.
some is front-loaded, but it doesn't mean that, we can't think of it that way.
right.
At about $100,000 a year to clean fresh pond, for some period of time. So that's one of my questions. Do we have any sense after year 10, how long do we get before this becomes, do we get decades of cleanliness
Centuries?
or centuries? Because I know it took a long time.
Yeah, likely more. So the issue that we're trying to correct is one that accumulated over many, many years, decades, if not centuries. We know, though, from, increased development and human activity that the degradation rate accelerates more recently. The 100 years ago, it was not deteriorating at the same rate that it's deteriorating now. The goal for remediation is to bring us back, to a point that would be equivalent, perhaps decades, if not centuries, in terms of the nutrient concentration in the setting. So it's what most would consider a forever solution once it's completed. And at that time, the equipment would be removed. And there would be no further costs associated with maintaining the water quality.
Yeah, unless I missed it, which I'm a little kvetchka today. I do want to point out that the report from the WQI really wanted the town board to be aware that what would be approving here with this request is really, is it fair to say proof of concept?
No, but part of the request funds a proof of concept.
Yes, that's what I mean. So the new thing here is, this is a proven technique. This is not, not unproven, but what's new here in this situation that I think we're going to focus on in this next phase is we're putting the water back. Usually the water goes away, it goes downriver, it goes someplace else.
Celtic,
Yeah, this is what we're
ongoing process
checking
for a
out.
decade, 8 to 10 years.
So there's no guarantee, but a very low probability of failure.
Right, so this is, what's unique to this project is that it would be sort of a closed loop system where we would extract water, filter it, and put it back into the same body of water. This process is well established. Typically what happens is the water, once it's processed, is not returned to that same body of water. So that's a little bit unique in this approach. Largely, we were forced into that circumstance because of the lack of suitable, treatment locations. There's just limited real estate around the pond. Most of it's private. Some of it is in the CPF asset package, and so there wasn't a lot of option.
So the concentration of phosphorus is at the
It's at the bottom.
is at the bottom. So we're sucking out of the bottom, treating, and returning to the top.
Well, we're returning to places where there won't be any interference with
Right.
the others. The phosphorus is at the bottom, primarily, if not exclusively, in bottom portions of the pond where there is no oxygen content in the water, so below a certain depth. So it's not to say that it's ubiquitous across the pond. There are certain pockets where we're trying to target.
Have you, I've been looking at that $1 million expenditure over the course of the life of this. Have we approached Jen, and what's the probability of being able to get some alternate funding to help pay for the cost of this?
Well, I would say right now, there's been no discussion about the construction. How will the construction efforts be funded? Largely, that's because we're not there yet. We're having a conversation of how do you design the system? How do you pay for the design? This project qualifies through many of the same grant opportunities that we regularly apply for. And we've asked for clarification from the state as to whether the long-term, operating costs of this project would be seen as operating costs or the actual efforts for the project. In most cases, operating expenses associated with the project of this scale are not grant fundable. But in this case, the state opined that they viewed the operating cost as the remediation project. So they see it akin to, paying, if it was a dredging project, it's paying for the fuel to run the dredging machine. That's critical and totally essential to the operation. So we would expect that if we did qualify for where we were awarded grants, that those would cover or go towards the overall cost of the project, not simply the initial startup components. Okay.
Under that same rationale, would it be eligible for WQI funds in year 3, 4, 5? I don't know. We'd have to look into that.
That's somebody else's.
Have to look
It
into
is adequate. Habitat.
Habitat restoration.
restoration, yeah.
What I'm trying to.
Right, right.
One of the variables with this, when it comes to how much it's going to cost over time, is how much sludge it's going to produce, correct? And how we dispose of that sludge.
Right.
So when they do the proof of concept kind of pilot test, that should give us an estimate to how much sludge should be produced and then
Yes.
how
That's precisely
frequently we
the,
need disposal. Okay.
Yep, is to take the, the process, apply it on a smaller scale in a desktop and laboratory setting to understand what the efficacy of the filtration and treatment will be before the system, gets fully designed and in place. That's what happens in the pilot program. That's the emphasis on expending those funds earlier to minimize costs later. And to speak more thoroughly about the risk assessment, costs of the project are driven by how long the project has to run for. So the more efficient the treatment process can be, the fewer number of years that we have to run the system for. That makes it less expensive. Evaluating the risk of total failure is very, very low. The risk of needing to fine tune the system and having the first years be less effective than the latter years, that's where we're seeing, the success, or that's how we're monitoring the success. It's not that we would expect the system to do nothing. It's just that it may take us a little bit longer to fine tune the process and get to the place where it's most efficient. And that's what has happened in other locations, is that they have not had a total failure. They just have stuttered in the beginning with their efficiency, with their nutrient extraction.
You kind of have to fine tune it and adjust as you go along. Like it's the same thing with the IA systems. Depending on different houses, you have different settings. So
Yes.
and it'll change over time too. So you have to account for that. Like as you reduce the phosphate numbers, then you might have to tweak how the system runs to continue being as effective. There's a whole bunch of stuff that plays into it.
That's totally right. And there is no identical location where you can look at what was done. Every body of water is unique with its geography, its topography, its chemistry, its bathymetry. And so that is the design challenge. That is what the designers are working on.
That was my next question, because I was going to ask that. Since they've been in the business for an extended period of time, you would think that they've handled other ponds similar to this that had phosphate problems. And couldn't the design be very similar to something that, again, I guess every situation is different, every situation is unique, and that's what, but I was concerned about the success rate at other sites, how, if they've been in the business doing this for, a decade or so, similar kinds of issues and problems, what has their success rate been?
Quite good.
Okay.
Yeah, quite good. Like I said, there's not a lot of instances where we're doing exactly this process, but the technique itself is well proven.
Question?
For us lay people, what's bathymetry?
Bathymetry, that's underwater biology.
One of the things we've heard, this isn't so much Joe, but just to mention it, because it's the conversation we're having, is, what are there, 14 people will benefit from this, people living around Fresh Pond. Which, theoretically, I sort of just disagree with that sort of concept. There's reasons to say it's more than 14 people. You probably can address that better than I can. But, it's sort of like saying we don't dredge the Real Point area because it only benefits those people in Cockles Harbor, or down at Silver Beach, put in those groins that you put in.
Groins, right.
Because it only benefits those people. I mean, it's the island. It's our asset. It's our
I was going to get
part of our playground.
Town asset.
Jay and I talked about this, I think, yesterday or some recently, and it is a town asset. It's a recreational spot. We own it. To be able to, down the road, if this problem is rectified, to be able to go down there with a kayak or to go fishing. I'm not pushing swimming, but there are no lifeguards on duty in there. It's not really a beach area type of thing. But it's a huge body of water. I mean, it is a very large, it's not a small pond type of thing. It's the largest freshwater body probably on the island. And it has potentially lots of good uses, not just for the people that live around there, but for all of us that could take advantage of it as a recreational area. And we would like to pursue that and that attitude of being able to open this up And that, so that the people that live around the pond would understand that we're doing it not just for the benefit of them, we're doing it for the benefit of all islanders that would love to go down there and utilize the pond, recreationally. So I think that's an important point.
I'm grateful that the Pond Association, which includes people not right on the pond, has stepped up. I mean,
Yes,
it's
yeah, and they have.
Yeah, and
leading the charge.
when they had their fundraiser a year or so ago, it was very well
Yeah.
attended, so there's a lot of support.
Yeah, there's strong support in the neighborhood, there's strong advocacy for the pond amongst the community. And the environmental benefits, certainly there are many as it comes to the pond itself. The pond is a town asset, so there is a liability component to making sure it's safe because there is public access. But also we know from this study that water that flows into the pond and is contained in the pond also flows out of the pond through natural groundwater paths. We know that those paths lead to both Dickerson and Manatee Creek. And so water that exits the pond now, which carries a higher level of those nutrients, is ultimately being carried through the ground, through some private drinking well paths, but also ultimately ending up in those two creeks. And so one ancillary benefit of increasing or improving the water quality in Fresh Pond is that the downstream effect will carry through to both Atlantic and Dickerson Creek, and that there will be less of a nutrient load entering in those areas because of the work that we've done at Fresh Pond. So we're providing some benefit a little bit further up the supply chain, so to speak.
Right.
That will have dividends for those saltwater locations as well.
Anybody else? Joe, thank you very much.
All right.
Okay, next on the agenda is the CPF acquisition plan update. Just real quick, this is the mandate with the plan. Town board of any town in the Peconic Bay region which has established a community preservation fund shall by local law adopt a community preservation project plan. This plan shall list every project which the town plans to undertake pursuant to the community preservation fund. It shall include every parcel which is necessary to be acquired in the town in order to protect community character. Such plan shall provide for detailed evaluation of all available land use alternatives to protect community character, including but not limited to fee simple acquisition, zoning regulations, including density reductions, cost of development, and site plan and design requirements, transfer of development rights, the purchase of development rights, and scenic conservation easements. Funds from the Community Preservation Fund may only be expended for projects which have been included in said plan. Said plan shall be updated not less than once every 5 years. So the last time it was updated was 2014 through 2019. So we need to address this. The Community Preservation Group has asked for some guidance on this. Is, the obvious things are, we have to update what's available, what's not available anymore, what was taken.
I'm well along on that list.
Okay,
On the list. So,
okay.
I've been working with the assessors to have accuracy.
Okay,
And so that's good, because that's just
Right.
frankly grunt work
Yeah.
that the committee,
Right.
they're already.
but
Put
there's
in a lot of
also in the plan, I don't have the plan in front of me. There's also a priority list. And, we have addressed some of the priorities. Actually, a number of purchases we made weren't on the priority list, but I think it's very easy to justify buying them. Let's see. Yeah.
With some updates.
I wrote on mine, the ones that we bought without it, but they were all valid, very important purchases we made, but they weren't on the list. So technically, somebody probably could have,
Well, I don't know, maybe Jerry, but I think that probably, and probably to use the Appendix C, well, they refer to it as annex, but Appendix E, the criteria. So even if it wasn't on the priority list, if it filled the, some amount of the
Yeah.
criteria and exceeded the 25 base point, right? I mean, I think that we
Yeah.
were, in our
Yeah.
right to
Right.
go forward with
Yeah.
those purchases. And, there have been some
Yeah.
pretty great
Yeah,
purchases.
and again, obviously, we're mandated to do it. One of the other reasons is we've been questioned a lot in the past 4 years on, well, that's how the town does things, but that's not what it says.
Right.
So, we
Right.
have to do things the way the
Try to
code
get
of the
them
law
along.
says and make sure we're doing everything the right way. The only other thing I would say, Gordon, is, Fred Deal brings up quite often that, 23 years ago, it was really land preservation we were looking at. He says now in 23 years, it's certainly land preservation, but more so it's community preservation. And what other alternatives do we have? Not that we're gonna use it for, housing or anything, but what uses can we use? And obviously, Glenowickus Airport comes up that, some of us felt that was aquifer protection and others felt it was, preserved land, we can't do anything. So I think we need to come up with some guidelines. And we also need, Amber has spoke to Fred Thiel's office to get that group back in the opinion group back together that we used to have
Yeah, so if we have a question.
Right.
It's composed of members of the towns that have some text of it. They will look at a specific issue and weigh in on whether or not they feel it's an allowable
Right.
use, purchase, whatever the question might be.
So, I marked up mine from the original and things that, possibly have changed. Or some things were added actually since then. Some of them had to do with the aquifer. So I guess, Gordon, how much direction do you want? It really is just updating, looking at alternative,
And making sure it like reflects the updated law. 'Cause
Yeah.
They,
WQI has been since then.
right.
I really didn't expect to come to this meeting because I wasn't aware of it really until this morning, okay? That CPF was really going to be on the agenda, okay? And let me just address something, okay, which I think, Jerry, Mr. Supervisor, you addressed today, was with Fred Field about considering usage of CPF money and really allocating to different, rather than for land, to maybe allocating more money for water quality. Okay, he was also quoted, which I think we sometimes have forgotten, and it was in something in the paper on 27 East, okay, that he talked about WQI. Okay, and he really mentioned, okay, that was something to look at. He said, but he wants to make sure all the money is being spent. It's being spent appropriately. And one of the statements that he made, which obviously for some reason, whether it wasn't done in the printed, but it was in the digital format, he also indicated, okay, that, WQIP money, 20% money, was not to be carried over from one year to the next. He referred to it as a slush fund. Not my words, it was really, that was what was in the digital format. So I just want to just clarify that issue. And I think what he was referring to is having plans for projects, not hard projects, but like when you have money, it's like going to a bank and you're borrowing money. You need to know what you're going to be using it for. You can certainly change it, but I think the whole intent of the regulation, which is one that we sort of had a little bit of a disagreement on, is that the money wasn't meant to be just sitting there in a bank and then later on deciding what to do with it. I just wanted to make that comment.
Gordon, just on that note, real quick, we've had this discussion numerous times. When the WQI was put into place, Bob DiStefano met with the town attorney at the time, met with Fred Beal's office, and we do a resolution annually encumbering that money.
I know that.
So it's not a slush fund.
Well, I'm quoting, that's not my statement. It was something, because you brought up the statement that
Right.
Fred Beal had just recently, but he also in that statement was this
Right.
statement I just repeated to you. So it's not something I made up. It's something he just recently stated.
So perhaps we should, in this plan, list the possible WQI projects that we see on the
Well,
horizon.
what they're doing is, as you talk about CPF and priority list, okay,
Right.
that's the same thing. Now with CPF, any properties, this whole thing of I myself individually got involved with community preservation, not my background, okay? And, you know, the legal ramifications of how these things take place in terms of acquisitions, I can't say that I'm the most knowledgeable of it, okay? And if we in fact didn't go through some rules relative to public hearings, okay? I'm sorry, but I take that criticism, I take exception to it because we have the town board with us each and every step of the way of any acquisitions we made. So at any given time, the town attorney or someone else could have brought this up, okay? I'm just.
But please don't take it as criticism. Again, it's the fact that the town board is constantly being challenged on, well, you're doing this, but the code says this. And quite honestly, we weren't following the letter of the law.
Well, when you say CPF, there's been.
The town board is ultimate. I agree with you.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
we have always tried, there's been nothing that has not been transparent, okay? Our liaison, a council person, or the town supervisor have always been there. I've been at the various meetings where I've always made this presentation to the town board, this is what we were trying to do. Going back to the acquisition plan, because I think it's important to bring this out, is that in that acquisition plan, okay, it shows all the potential properties that we have the availability to buy. And again, it's listed almost every single piece of property, whether there was a house on it or wasn't a house on it.
Right.
So we've stayed within that range, and we also worked with Suffolk County on their master plan that they've had, because that was a way of us getting funding with Suffolk County as a partnership. Going forward, okay, when we develop the plan, the reason I'm looking for town board, because we've gotten into the, you know, we have a new set of procedures which spell out the town board will consider the usage of the property, okay? And in recent acquisitions, these issues came up in terms of perhaps moorings. And it's also in your plan for 2022, you know, what can we do with CPF? Can we put wells on it? Can we do docks? Can we do water? You know, you have your own way of, this is something that's new that hasn't been there. So that's why I feel that the town board should participate is, you know, if these are the things that you want, I think you should lay out some groundwork. We're only an advisory group. We only make a recommendation. You ultimately either say yay or nay.
Yep, that's
Okay,
it.
and I'd be glad to work with anybody on it, but I think it's not in good interest to, for the CPF to create a plan. And we just need some help. We need some criteria, and that's really what the liaisons should do for any committee. We don't make the decisions, okay? So we're just looking for some guidance.
Yeah, that's why I brought it here. So these criteria that are in Appendix C, which to me is the real crux of the guidance.
Right.
Right? Do we use those?
Yes.
We do, because, you know, I've only been around for a couple of transactions. So is it written down someplace how a property has been evaluated according to that criteria?
We use, okay, so the issue has been, like, for example, the question was asked about, is the water palatable?
No, I'm not asking about that. I really don't want an answer to
I
that.
want to address that.
Yeah, but I really don't want to have that discussion. I want to have this discussion.
Conversation, I thought he was here to.
I'm just asking a very specific question, and you like to beat me up with that. I'm tired of it. So can we just answer, do we use these criteria? Where do I find them for each property when you evaluate? Because I want to know how to phrase this stuff.
I think, first of all, the county uses that grading system.
The county, okay,
I think the first starting point is to change that grading.
okay, yeah.
And we need to create, what are we trying to do? Like, we've discussed this thing of, you know, acquisitions, listen, I'm the one really who, when I look at property, I not only look at it in terms of a land preservation, I'm looking at it in terms of how does it match affordable housing and how can it work with the town in other ways, okay? So, you know, it's not just about buying land, okay? But the way we look at it is we look at, is it adjacent to the property? There are these different criteria.
Like, they're right here, and what I was wondering is, see, if I could, I looked for them, I couldn't find them, but if I could find where these criteria were sort of rated for previous purchases,
Do you
it would
have, do you have
help.
like worksheets?
Yeah, it would help us guide, it would help us guide doing it over.
We'll provide.
You know, so that, because to give you the guidance that you're asking for. Yeah, yeah.
But we need to, first of all, we need to communicate and we need to sit down and we'll work on these things, okay? Anytime.
Well, I'm trying to get to a point where the town board comes to you with not a higgly-piggly, this person, that we've thought about it and given you real guidance that's actually guiding you, not, 5 different
Can I make a
disparate
suggestion?
opinions.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes, Steve.
Wait, Town law section 64-E4 is what is community character, what you can use money for to protect community character.
Right.
The town board needs to look at those
Yeah.
and see what they want to give priority to, and then convert that into this point sheet or update the point sheet.
I
to
get
provide.
that, but I want to see how it's been, because they've been successful. So why wouldn't I look at the history?
No, I'm
Right.
not saying don't do that.
Right.
But I'm saying the town board has to get you that information of what their priorities
Get them,
are.
right.
Vis-a-vis for,
Yeah,
and then we want to put that into this form.
Right.
So when they're looking at properties and reviewing properties, this is updated.
yeah, exactly. And I think the audit is going to be interested in this.
I just want to comment, you seem to think that I'm looking to beat you up over something, and that is not the intent.
I don't really
Okay,
feel that's
I would like to address it, though, if I could.
No, I think we should just leave it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm looking at 64E, the, CPF legislation. And one of the things that I'm seeing under, it's like 64E, 6E, is that the plans shall establish the priorities for preservation and shall include the preservation of this farmland as its highest priority. Said plan shall also list every water quality improvement project which the town plans to undertake pursuant to the Community Preservation Fund and shall state how such project would improve existing water quality. I don't think that's ever been included in this document.
Have that, yeah.
So that's going to be,
This is updated
I was gonna
since the
say
last plan.
That was the part of the 20%.
Right.
That's a big deal.
So it's really, they've combined these things, and it really there's a lot of clarification that really has to be done there, okay?
yeah, so this really needs to get updated.
And Meg, if you go up a little further
2019.
Oh, okay.
to 4O, preservation of community character shall also include the protection and improvement of the quality of all water resources. So I think we need to define what that means.
Yeah, there's
You know, or
actually
an opinion on what that
significant amount of
means.
work that needs to be done on this
Yeah,
because it is
that's
so
where I think
outdated, it
that-
missed a whole section of law.
Right,
I think that's where we've been trying to get Fred Field to have this committee,
Yep.
okay, of the 5 East End towns with a separate attorney that's not biased to any particular town, so that we can clarify some of these things so it's not so great. I mean, community character is such a generalized, I mean, I know we use it in a lot of different ways, okay, and it can be
Right.
spoken about in a whole, the problem with the whole community preservation regulation is that it's interpreted, okay? And, the thing that what CPF and this committee needs is that when we do have a change to 64E, I'm not sitting where you're sitting every day. It would be good that even our committee be abreast of changes for some of the regulations. And I don't know how that takes place, and I guess maybe that's not a question to ask you, Stephen, is that our committee, everybody's a group of volunteers. Everybody has different backgrounds, but we're not following these things. So I guess what I really would like to see happen is that in the future, when the regulations are in fact changed, we shouldn't know about, I would like us not to know about it late, and I don't know how you do that.
Right.
Okay, because when we found out about the 64E change in October of last year, not last year, that was 22, 21, okay, it was changed, okay? We were still working under the old 64E, okay? So I don't know how that works, and again, I don't know how it works in the municipality, how when regulations change, is there a certain, does this come to somebody, or is it? No. So it's really.
Generally, like Fred Thiel will be nice and, send out certain changes or whatever. But it's really when you stumble upon it by doing research.
Right.
So it's not like with our town code, you update the town code and then if you have a paper version, you get the updated version from the town clerks and you update your book and you're made aware of it. As far as state legislation that changed it, you're not. So, but you're absolutely right. The CPF, as soon as the town board knows, town attorney knows, it should be conveyed to you. And, we can ask Fred to always tickle us when any changes are made.
Or just make it an annual point that like every January you review the code and see if it's been updated. I mean, if it's what you work under, I would want to know that I had the most updated version. So periodically just check the state legislation. Yes, I mean,
Yeah, it's online.
yeah.
Listen, again, I think it's really important that there has never been a time when we've gotten involved with a piece of property. Again, the town board has not been advised of even through our meetings or through an in-person executive session. Okay, so just want to make sure it's clear because I don't want anybody to walk away thinking, okay, we've done something that was inappropriate. We've tried to stay within those guidelines. Do we make mistakes? That's why I have an eraser here. I probably make the most mistakes of anybody being, and just like any leader, okay, you're gonna make mistakes. And if I make some mistake, I apologize. I apologize to the board over if at one of our meetings, okay, weren't clear in terms of how acquisitions took place and who participated. I'm sorry, I reach out to people. I'm not looking to hide from anything, okay, but I would like to have a little better conversation. Like today, for example, the only reason I'm here, okay, is because I see something that has to deal with CPF. I would like it if the board could just give me a call or let me know that there's something on the agenda that I could prepare or at least be part of, okay? I'd like to be part of the solution, not the problem.
And I think the intent of the board was to come up with some guidelines, then bring the CPF in, and this is, what our thoughts.
Explain that, but yeah, thank you.
I think sometimes it would be very, if we could just get the CPF, it doesn't necessarily mean me, but a few people. And just like these guidelines you're talking about, we don't have to come to a public meeting or a work session to talk about that. A phone call, an email, something.
Well, we do though. We do. We do. We have to discuss them in a public
No, I
forum.
know, but like the things that you were looking for.
We had a pathway to do this that we wanted to take, and so we're doing it that way.
Well, and
And we do a working group like similar to what I said about this.
Right, we can do a working group,
Liaison,
yeah.
one town
After we
board
come
member
up
be
with-
you and let's.
But after we come up with some agreement here among us.
Guidelines.
But that being said, we do need to move forward with this because this is so outdated and it doesn't accommodate for the changes in the law.
We know an audit is coming.
We know that the working group for Fred Thiel is not up and running yet. So I do think that it's our responsibility to take a good old college try at this.
Yeah.
And then hopefully by the time we're done with it, his working group is up and we can ask them any questions we have. But I do think that we need to move forward with this.
Yes.
Because it's just been too long.
What I would like to do is, back in 2021, we had a list of priority properties that our committee thought were important to deal with. I would like to continue with that list as we put it, or change it, and let's put it in some.
That's all
kind of
part of this big package. I mean,
Legwork here, and we're gonna have a meeting, as Jerry just said, with the CPF. After we have some guidelines established, some lists updated, that, so we all can be working off of fresh data. And so,
because I saw all the lists and they're extensive. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of information there, but a lot of it has changed hands or,
The list is not the
Right.
list of the easy part, it's the criteria.
Right.
What's our intent, what are our usage, how
Right.
do we do this thing? Even, some of this thing was related to farmland, okay, for agricultural purposes.
Right.
Now, we say we don't have anything on it because we don't have any agriculture, but that doesn't mean like we couldn't get involved with a piece of property for an
Right.
agricultural purpose.
Right,
Doesn't mean that
absolutely.
we can't get in a combination of land preservation with something tied to it with affordable housing or water quality.
I think the identification is twofold.
Right.
One, we got to identify the big parcels, and see how they fit into the criteria. Or two, look at the criteria and where, which parcels,
Yeah.
for this, so to come.
Thank you.
Gordon, I just want to say for the record, the town board is, I can speak for myself, is very supportive of all the work the CPF has done. And the reason, and we're not questioning any procedures that the CPF has done. I mean, I've said it numerous times, I'll say it again. We're getting questioned on everything we do, that's not what the code says. So we want to make sure that everything we do, good or bad, which usually it's good because it works, is what the law says. And that's what we're trying to make sure we do with the plan.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the list is the board member reports. Meg?
I have CPF meetings, not CPF. CPAC, thank you. We're just talking CPF. So our next meeting is going to be February 28th.
Yeah.
And we'll roll out a new chapter. Oh, here's my planner. I'm going to roll out a new chapter for that in the beginning of February. So it's the demographics chapter, the economic development chapter are up on the website for people to comment on. We'll be discussing those in February. I'm sorry, it's February 27th. That's off a day, my bad. And then,
Sorry, economic development, what was the second?
and there's like a demographics chapter, like a change chapter. Yeah, and the caveat with that is that data for Shelter Island, when it comes to demographics and income, is very hard to get straight. So we're really looking at trends because there really are no hard numbers. It's really hard to delineate who lives here year round, who lives here 6 months, 9 months out of the year, who is just, part-time, so you really can't tell. So the data is more for looking at trends and seeing change over time, because it's really hard to nail down specific numbers with the census and with the ACH estimates. For small communities, those are always kind of variable, so hard to nail down. But other than that, we're going to start doing public workshops again in March. So we have some tentative dates out, and we'll approve those dates at the February meeting. Other than that, that's all I have. That was my,
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jim?
Yes, recreation meeting is tomorrow. We're still looking for lifeguards. We hired 8 last year, 4 are returning, 4 aren't. The pay is $17 an hour. You can call Emily Kraus at 631-749-0978. There are obviously coursework that has to be done in terms of CPR, AED certification, and also for lifeguarding itself. The minimum age is 16 years of age. All right, so it's a great summer job. Just like to get the word out there as early as possible for those people that might be interested. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, a day that's all near and dear to our hearts, we are having a luncheon over at the community center, which is right across the street for the seniors. We do discriminate here. You must be 60 or older, I guess, to be able to attend. But we'd like to get a nice turnout for that. So that's Valentine's Day, Tuesday, February 14th at the community center.
Jim, I think we're going to make a real concerted effort to invite as many people as we can to see what the program is and what we do.
Okay.
It's not just
Okay.
for the Silver Circle people.
Okay. Beer management, I'm not going to give I just follow it always, so, but I'm just going to give you a little up because you and I have been talking about sitting down with them. Michelle, numbers are in.
Yeah.
Both coordinates those.
Yeah.
So the total number is 69 deer.
And
So the first week was 59. That was the first week in January. Then they take 2 weeks off to get the deer to come back in because by the end of the first week, the deer are gone. So the deer come back in, second week, 10 deer. It goes from 59 down to 10 for a total of 69 deer.
How's that compete with last year?
The numbers are constantly going down, but there's a reason for that. The biggest reason of all for not getting numbers is oak tree acorns. The acorn, there were none this year. You could actually walk through the place and used to step on a million of these acorns as you went hiking. Crunch, crunch, crunch. There were no acorns this year. So deer are drawn to that. That's a kind of a protein supplement for them. I think throughout the winter, fall and winter, it's how they build up their fat and everything else to get it to survive winter. So where are the deer? The deer basically are in your backyard. They're not in woodlands because the woodland oak trees are not producing. It's cyclical. So it makes it more difficult to go get the deer. Again, didn't discuss the flyover with him. I don't think the flyover has quite happened yet. We were shooting for the end of January, which is, today's the day. So it looks like either it's happening in the next couple of days or it's early February. But island-wide, the effort has been there. Guys have been out. I've seen the cars parked at the various. Number one thing here is with limited access.
Right.
So some of the bigger pieces of property that we would like to, I won't name them because Bo does approach the people that own those big properties. You get on those big properties. So when you pass by the big property, you say, there's 50 of them right out there in the field. Why don't they go get those 50? Because we're not allowed to hunt there. So again, we'll go back to BJ's situation where she talks about benefits island-wide, not compartmentalizing deer management, but we're all in this together. If we hope to get a handle on tick-borne illness, cut down on vegetation loss and oak tree forest loss and damage to vehicles and things of that nature. But number one thing, obviously, is human health. That tick-borne illness is alive and well. We've got to bring the herd down. Our goal was to get the herd cut in half. We came close last year, but after the May and June birthing of fawns, we were a little bit above the 50%. But make no mistake about it, the deer population on Shelter Island is down considerably. Not down 50%, maybe down 40%, but it's not down 50%. And we're working towards that end. But again, I said to Bo, on behalf of all five of us, what can we do as a town board to help you reach this goal? And he talked about lobbying, getting, trying to lobby the current laws that we have on the books here that limit us to, to what we can do on various sized properties. So that's kind of it. But when we finish with, now we enter into what's called the deer management season, used to be called the nuisance season. That's February and March. So we have 2 months. We do try to target adult does during that particular time because for every adult doe, you're preventing 1.75 fawns. So if you kill an adult doe, you're really taking out 2.75 deer in the count once you come June, July. So that's really what the targeting is. Again, it's an ongoing issue, but we're working on it. The other thing I have is Conroy House. I sent you everything on that. I do have phone number, valid address. I do have the company that we used in South Portland area to serve. I did discover that other than where he lives at a certain address, right next door, and I have his home address, home telephone number there right next door, or 2 houses down, I presume could be a brother, same last name, and they live on the same block. So you got to figure that there's a relationship there somehow. We don't know what the homeowner is, whether he's alive, he's not alive. We've made attempts in the past. I did talk to Mr. DeStefano over the weekend and gathered some information from him. And he provided me with some leads. I looked up some of the stuff, passed it on to Stephen, and Stephen is going to look into this. My recommendation is that we serve both places, both 36 and 40, the addresses that are given here on Hillside Avenue, to make sure that we try to get the best. Now, whether we call and we send something registered, or we hand deliver and have a personal service, hand somebody something. The house, I just sent you pictures from, I take him from the road yesterday. The roof continues to buckle and buckle. It's close to caving in. You know, again, the half-inch of snow that we got this morning was not the answer. If you're gonna put a snow, it's not that would be addressed. But it is what it is, and our goal is to get something done, hopefully, prior to the start of May, June, whether people come back. We still have some months ahead of us, but we have to make every attempt to be able to, and which we have in the past, by the way. This is not like a first response to this. We are constantly repeating efforts to get in touch with the owner. The house inside, from what we had an engineering people come in, take a look at it, independent of the town, and not just our building department report, but a separate independent engineer came and said the house is completely unsalvageable. You know, it's a tear down. And the picture that they took and what they wrote up is evidence to that. So I think we are, you know, we've done everything responsible that we could do. And now we need to make this last step, wait the 30 days and then
Yeah,
proceed.
the letter of the law is the certified return receipt.
Right.
Failing. We're going above and beyond to try to reach out by phone. I called the phone number we have for him. I sent a couple emails, no response. We're trying to exhaust all that. It is a drastic measure we're taking to the cost. So we want to make sure we, you know, dot every I and cross every T to make sure we try to
Correct.
do it right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Amber?
I don't, I'm doing a lot of different things, but,
East End Supervisors, anything?
yeah, Meg and I went to the East End Supervisors last Wednesday, and they did talk about, a little bit about the, what?
That's a good point.
I know, I have
So many other things happened since then.
Great, no, how about next? They did talk about the county's hack and just trying to, you know, they're still rebuilding, as, you know, working with the county, we see that they have their emails back and things are slowly coming back online. So it's just something for us to keep in mind. They will be sharing with, you know, town tech people at some point, you know, best practices and things like that, just to kind of help everybody not end up in a similar situation. And so that will be coming down the pike, but it was kind of interesting and just, you know, it really was quite an event for the.
And I guess Fred wasn't at the meeting.
Fred was not at the meeting, but one of his people were, and so I pounced on her at the end to say, like,
This is our list.
this is what we need. Yeah, we got this, and we got this. So she said she was having a meeting with Fred the next day, but he was in session up in Albany. Another thing that I guess in working with Jennifer Mezziano, had I mentioned about the Suffolk County Hazard Mitigation Project for building a local floodplain management? I feel like sometimes I sit in the seat for other meetings and then I'm like,
No, I don't think that was mentioned because I don't remember.
So Suffolk County received a $100,000 grant and all the 10 towns are able to participate in it. And what they want to do is develop a flood plan management for FEMA so that homeowners on Shelter Island, I mean, I don't know, some of you, like, I know with clients, sometimes it's hard to, insurance gets canceled and then trying to find somebody else who will insure, especially if you're in like near shore overlay. They're trying to develop this mitigation plan so that we can get a better rating. And so insurers will look at Shelter Island, especially when you look at, you know, somebody in a high ground area, this is going to be subject to flooding, but they get painted with the entire, like, you're this close to the water, we're not looking at your elevation.
Do you have to apply for that, or it's already?
No, we just have to accept working with Suffolk County on this. It's a $100,000 grant, 90% paid for, so 10% match. So that's $10,000, which all 10 towns would be $1,000 each. And it's not an outlay of money, it's an outlay of personal, what do they call it, forced labor accounting. So we would have probably somebody from the building department work with them to provide the information that's needed for the consultants to work on this plan. So I just have to finish going through because it's not our direct grant. We're piggybacking with the county. I'll have to look back at our procedures on, you know, if we need a resolution, but the outlay is $1,000 and it would be fine. So, but it's a good thing for the community. So just letting people out there know and try and stay on top of what the result is. And also it gives us some information too about future mitigation costs. It helps facilitate public education, so for storms, upcoming storms, flood preparedness, things like that. So there should be some various benefits. Yeah, that's it. The rest of it's internal stuff I'm
Okay.
working on.
BJ?
Jim, PEP and
Yes.
CCE and WQI. And, actually, let me just expand this conversation. We have a big proposal before WQI for a water quality improvement in the bays from a couple of people from Cornell Cooperative Extension. We have another project before the WAC from another group inside CCE for starting community oyster gardening. You know, and potentially on public, bottom. And then we have PEP doing things, in our waters, for our waters. And it feels very disjointed. It feels like we could be doing the same thing over and over again, or maybe even counterproductively, I don't know. So Jim, I was just wondering if you could help me work with PEP and Cornell Cooperative and our committees that have been approached to try to bring this together in probably a Zoom meeting to talk about these proposals so that we can have a more holistic approach to this.
Will do.
Make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a lot of money. Yeah.
I didn't drop I did ask.
I know you did at the last meeting.
I
Yes.
did.
Yeah. But everybody's busy.
I get it, but I think it's well worth, and it is a little disjointed and difficult to understand, and it involves money. So,
And not only that, a lot of, it would take up, if we did all of this, I don't know how much space it would take up, but it could be significant. And then we have Bayman to think about and people who want a mooring. And I mean,
right.
we need to see a big picture here, I think.
Right, yeah, I think we need to make a comprehensive list of what we're already doing.
Yeah.
And then what's being proposed and see how it meets, like marries together. If some of it's just duplicating what we're already doing, does it actually, support what's already in process, or is it,
Right.
there's a lot to it, but I think we need to come up with a big picture of what's going on around the island, not just on the island, but in the
Can
communities
anybody-
around us too.
Can anybody, just in terms of prior to setting that meeting up with PEP, develop what we actually are doing right now? Just give me those bullet points so I can relay those bullet points to her,
Yeah.
the director.
I could do
Actually,
that.
what we're doing or what we're asked.
Right.
Yeah.
What's before us?
Right,
Because
Correct.
what we're doing is actually not that extensive yet.
Right, okay,
But, yeah, I could get you that hopefully by noon
Yeah.
tomorrow.
okay, all right.
All right.
And to be real honest with you, because it's good for the public to hear, say invite her here,
Yeah. Yeah,
invite
once
her
we
for
have
a
it,
work
yeah,
session,
yeah.
put her on a work session and come in and have this discussion in front of the entire community.
Right. With the other proposees.
Yeah, they can zoom in if they would like, yeah.
well, and then.
Or even get her, even if she wanted to zoom in, but she's been wanting to get here to make some, yeah.
Yeah.
Also getting back to when we talk about, grant applications and things like that, what are our town goals?
Right.
They're coming at us with what they want to do.
Yes.
What do we as a town want to do?
Yeah.
And what helps us accomplish that?
And it might be helpful to track it all on a map, like a town map of where we're doing what projects, what ecosystems we have in what areas, so we know how to benefit those ecosystems and support them. So, if someone's coming at us with an eelgrass management rehabilitation project, okay, well, was that historically a location that had eelgrass? Because if it was historically a location that had eelgrass, maybe it's a good place to try to bring it back. Maybe not. Maybe there's a reason why. So I think we need to kind of comprehensive plan this.
Oh, exactly.
It needs an
does, and we-
overall comprehensive look at what we're doing and where we're going.
Since we've brought Stony Brook on board and their marine division, and the amount of research that's being done in Peconics, specifically at shellfish and
Eelgrass.
how do oysters,
Eelgrass?
Scallops.
There's a lot of data that has been collected and continues to be collected, and we know the causative effects. We know we don't there are certain things beyond your control, temperature of the water. I mean, you know, what do? How do you cool the water? The water's going to do what the water's going to do. But in terms of predators, in terms of, you know, getting the research done on scallops that can survive 5 to 10 degree warmer temperatures, looking at spawning areas, looking at these parasites, and how can you eliminate some of these parasites or reduce the numbers? What do they thrive on? Low oxygen levels. Is there anything that can be? Is that just an assumed thing that when the water gets warmer, the oxygen levels decrease? Somebody needs to explain that really in
Well, it's because
detail.
algae blooms
Yeah.
explode and take up the
Take up the
oxygen.
oxygen.
So yeah, they kind of go hand in hand.
So, I mean, there's a lot of good things that they're doing in the Peconics that is for a separate thing, but I think if we focus this attention strictly on water quality and shellfish, it would be good to bring them in, just to focus on that one presentation.
Good.
Okay, one other thing, I just want to mention that I asked Kevin Lukmansky to kind of, to update us on what he's found about a notification system so that we can keep the public better informed about what is being discussed at the town board meetings, the work sessions and meetings. So hopefully, you know, Kevin will have something for us next week is what my hope is, a recommendation of how to do this,
That's good.
okay?
Great.
Sounds good.
Steven, you have anything for us?
No, Mr. Supervisor.
Amber, anything for tonight? Okay, all right, we'll open it up to the public. Any questions, comments? Hey, John Needham.
John Needham, introduction. Here's a CPF question. Question just, I don't hardly anything about. Is there the parcel priority list, is that publicly available?
Yes.
Yes.
How do I,
be.
how do I access
You
that?
can go online to the committee section, Community Preservation Fund. They have the plan.
The 2014 plan is there.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else in the audience?
And my one comment though, Jerry, is I love the agendas, get back to where we get some meat and potatoes in these agendas, which I'd like to see us continue to do. You know, I know it's a 2-hour, you know, to get through it all, but there's some teeth in here and there's some priority items in here. And I hope that every week we come in, we have this kind of agenda to go after. That's my goal.
Okay, Pam Devers?
Hi, good afternoon. Since you were going over the resolution for the Rams Head Inn dock application, I'd just like to point out a few things that are, I think, incorrect.
No.
One
Pam,
is the
Pam,
date.
you can say it now. Wait,
No,
Pam-
one is that, listen, this is very,
Pam,
very particular. One,
Tonight at the town board meeting, any public comments regarding any resolutions we're gonna do will be heard. So that would really be the time to go over this.
Yeah.
Right, Stephen?
Yes.
Before we,
In other words,
Start
we'll
the
open the meeting.
okay, but I just,
You know, open it up for-
the one thing that's important is the date at the very top. The date says it's the permit effective August 24th, and it's actually June 8th, 2022. Okay, these are just a few little details that I think should be corrected. That's when the dock was modified. That permit on August 24th, 21 was for the very first application you received. Okay, so I mean, if you're, you know, I don't know how much you're gonna
received
go
another
over this
modified
later
permit.
tonight. I know, but the date that
We're
you
not
have in the
supposed to say anything.
resolution here doesn't match that date. So that's all,
Amber.
Right.
that's all. And then,
Okay.
and
have her
then
mute?
where you, and
Double
then
check
where
it, but I
you
think we
mentioned,
checked.
I'm sorry. Okay, these are the things that I noticed. When you go to where it's pursuant to part 617, you have section 617.10. I believe that should say, I believe that should say 617.5. 617.10 refers to the generic EIS, not the type 2 actions. The section of the state law for type 2
Yeah.
actions is 617.5. So I'm just pointing it
yeah,
out.
no, but what I'm gonna say is Tim is not on this Zoom anymore. So I would actually rather have you restate this before we do the resolutions. He'll be on at 6 o'clock. Because,
We're doing it first, right, Em?
yes, yes,
All right.
yeah, I mean, we would open it up.
Comment
Will be
on the
first.
resolutions will be the first thing that we do in the meeting, so.
For him, because he's the one who pulled it from all of the documentation, so I really want him to pull this. You know,
Okay,
to,
those were just the two specifics. Those were just the two specifics on the language there. And then I did have a question of other things of the language, that the 5
Save
by
it for tonight.
85-foot dock,
Yeah.
is that
Yeah.
going to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
elevated in any way?
again, I'd like for, Tim to be present.
Okay, no, if I must, no, that's fine, that's fine. I don't, if we're going, if there would be open for these comments later this evening, I will be happy to save it for tonight, Mr. Supervisor. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
that's fine. Thank you very much.
Darrell?
Good afternoon, everybody. I guess I'm going to fall into the Pam Demarest category because I had some observations and questions around the resolution with respect to the Rams Head Inn dock. I have a 6:30 conflict, so if you're saying that things are going to happen right away, I can try to be on if I won't be able to be on video.
Yes, because what the order of events for the agenda will be pledge to the flag, correspondence, supervisor's report, and then we open it up to the public for any comments on the resolutions before us.
Is it worth putting, just, that might be a little bit tight. I'll try to be on. Is it worth putting comments in an email and sending them to one of you to pass on?
Yes, and send them to me and I'll forward them to Tim.
The hearing's closed.
And yeah, I mean, as long as it's, it's pertinent to the.
For the resolution.
Yeah, like Pam sounds like she's got.
Yeah,
edits,
it's really clarifications to the resolution, because I think some of the language is not clear. I think some of the discussion you all had on enforcement wasn't clear.
If it's of a technical nature, you could put it in writing, and send it to Tim, that decision makers aren't privy to it, and just handle it that way. You should probably ask Pam to do the same thing. Put it in an email. I'll get it to Tim before.
Okay, yeah.
That works.
Yeah, if you, title it, you can send it to me, title it Rams Head Inn dock resolution, and then I will
Okay.
just immediately forward it on to
Tim. Pam, can you do the same thing?
And that gives him a heads up
Yeah.
to like double check dates and stuff, so he has time to check it on the fly.
I think that's wise.
Because I don't think he has sent us anything with the
No.
revised resolution yet.
No.
No, so if he's working on that now, then that would be good.
Okay, I will do the same then.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else in the audience, the Zoom audience? Okay, I'm gonna make a motion that we close the meeting and go into executive session for an interview.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.